B. Collins.
Peter B. Collins, News and Comment. It's Wednesday, March 8th, 2017. It's International Women's Day, and your humble host is decked out in a bright red shirt in solidarity with women across the country and around the globe who are striking and protesting today. And if you haven't had a chance yet to listen to the roundtable in-depth interview conversation that I released yesterday, there was an important comment that I excerpted from it from L.A. Kaufman, a talented writer, and she has covered and participated in demonstrations, protests over the years here in the United States, and she's written a book about it. And she made the point that these mobilizations are not so much about having direct impact at the moment. They are about building movements. And I see this going on, and I think that it's an important element of the resistance movement against the Trump problem in this country. And my only cautionary note is that you cannot rely on the Democratic Party to represent the real interests of American women in the political food fights that are going on in Washington today. So just scanning the papers and websites, I see that in Providence, Rhode Island, 7 women who work as clerks and a deputy court administrator took the day off today. They went on strike, and as a result, the court had to shut down. And it's an example. This event today is based on the protest movement called A Day Without a Mexican. It's called A Day Without a Woman. And when women take the day off, whether it's from mothering or from workplace activities, well, we notice the difference, and that was the intention of this operation today. In Lafayette, Indiana, the home of Purdue University, there were a few dozen demonstrators who turned out at a downtown plaza at noontime today, and it's described as a spirited gathering. Signs include, "I strike for full social provisioning." So I think that this is interesting. There was a staged walkout from the House of Representatives by mostly female Democratic lawmakers, showing their solidarity with the people who were taking some risk by expressing themselves today. And a 25-year-old lawyer in Washington, Wahia Rais, held a sign that said, "Keep your tiny, tiny, tiny hands off my uterus." And also in Lafayette, where one reporter filed, a coffee shop called Fuel shut down and told people to go and attend the marches. I think that this is important to see this type of resistance. I'm going to tell you as we get to our immigration story a little bit later about a protest action in San Francisco this weekend that some of my Bay Area listeners might want to get involved with. For many years now, I have considered Jason Leopold a friend and a colleague. He is an intrepid investigative reporter who bases a lot of his journalism on public documents, public records. He is one of the most prolific users of the Freedom of Information Act. And yesterday, in a series of tweets, and they were combined into a Facebook post that I saw, Jason reported that the National Security Administration, the NSA, has brushed back the latest lawsuit from Leopold trying to force them to release reports from the NSA Inspector General. And they have responded by launching an investigation into Jason Leopold, by smearing him in legal documents, and his new employer, BuzzFeed, issued a statement. This attempt by a government agency to hide documents by smearing a reporter is pathetic and disturbing. There are a number of ways the government can reasonably deny an information request, but character assassination is not one of them. Frankly, it's unprecedented and un-American. We employ Jason not because he floods the government with paperwork, but because he fights hard for information that Americans are legally entitled to see. This unusually personal and aggressive act by the NSA suggests an attempt to distract as much as possible from the specific documents requested and to showboat on behalf of a president who enjoys disparaging the press. Now, I think the timing here is purely coincidental. But I will note that yesterday, Jason Leopold published a report at BuzzFeed based on Freedom of Information Act releases from the National Park Service. And he got the official photographs taken by, and with your taxpayer dollars, taken from helicopters over the National Mall at the time of Trump's inauguration. And you know that he was so thin-skinned about that, and he believes that the media slimed him because they didn't report the millions and millions of people who weren't there. And by comparing a photo of Obama's inauguration in 2009 and Trump's in 2017, it was easy for the naked eye to discern that. So Leopold got a hold of those photos, and BuzzFeed released them yesterday, and I do not believe that that was related to this new assault in a 33-page filing in response to the FOIA lawsuit. So I don't have the 33-page document. I've asked Jason for it. I've also invited him to join me for a fresh interview, and I hope he will in the next few days. But let me just run through this series of tweets so that you get an idea of what's going on. The NSA filed an extraordinary 33-page Open America stay in my lawsuit against the agency. And an Open America stay essentially cites a clause in the FOIA law that says the agency can take its sweet-ass time. That's my translation of the legalese. And the government and NSA then go on to say that Leopold was hired by BuzzFeed in an effort to deluge them with FOIA requests. The government attributes to Leopold what was reported here about his FOIA lawsuits. The FOIA lawsuit 3 years ago was a request for all Inspector General reports and for semi-annual reports to Congress. For more than 2 years, the NSA wouldn't respond to the request, so he filed another demand back in October of 2016. NSA finally responded, denied a fee waiver, and said there was no public interest in those Inspector General reports. Really? So then late last year, he filed another lawsuit. NSA and government attorney responded by stating that it has located 22,000 pages of responsive documents. Holy shit. That's what Jason put. And then he said, if the Inspector General has 22,000 pages, then something must be going on at NSA. NSA asked Leopold to narrow his request. No, he said. They proposed processing the minimum amount per month, 400 pages, and he said they should do more. Now, the State Department did this last year in slow walking the release of Hillary Clinton's emails, and Leopold was able to persuade a federal judge in Washington to expedite that process. Let's see. Then, in the brief, the NSA calls Jason Leopold a FOIA terrorist, and they cite a reference to him as well that he was a member of a FOIA posse. But Leopold notes that those tags on him come from the FBI and the Department of Justice. He has quoted them in referring to him as a FOIA terrorist, but I've never seen him use that tag himself. So the rest of this is interesting, and it is clear that this is way out of line. Now, maybe the NSA feels emboldened because Trump is such an attack dog on the American media that maybe they feel that he will approve of this effort to smear Jason Leopold and suppress the documents from the NSA. But it's hard to know because on the other front, Trump thinks he was wiretapped, perhaps by NSA or CIA or FBI, he don't know. And so we are swimming in murky waters these days. Two members of the Senate, Democrat Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island and Senator Lindsey Graham, the Republican from South Carolina, they have written to the FBI and Department of Justice asking for copies of any warrant applications and court orders related to wiretaps of President Trump, the Trump campaign, or the Trump Tower. The letter says, we'd like to review any such applications once they are disclosed and proceed as appropriate with the oversight that the President has requested. So this is still an area that Donald Trump could clear up by snapping his fingers. He could declassify anything related to the FISA court and the Trump campaign immediately. And his failure to do so either shows that he and his staff in the White House are clueless about the president's classification powers, or they just really don't want us to know. And I can't tell you which of those options is more accurate at this time. Down the road from me in Silicon Valley, the tech companies are scrambling to rewrite and patch their code after the WikiLeaks disclosures yesterday of this trove of Vault 7 of hacking tools that were used by the CIA. They've been compromised, and someone, a source who wants to see a debate about the CIA's role in surveillance, and I would insert there domestic surveillance, they released this information to WikiLeaks, we are told, by WikiLeaks. So one of the biggest things revealed is that the CIA had a whole collection of what are called first-day vulnerabilities. And that refers to the first day of release of a new round of software, and that, then people go to work to see if it's got bugs or vulnerabilities. And if the companies don't correct those vulnerabilities, they can be exploited by spooks and bad actors. And it's been widely argued by Bill Binney and others. By the way, Bill Binney, the former NSA technical director, gave an interview to Sean Hannity the other day, which means that right-wingers are finally catching up on the extent of domestic surveillance run by the NSA in this country, and I'm happy for that. Bill Binney is a very credible man, whether he talks to me or to Sean Boy Hannity. So we remember a year ago when the FBI demanded that Apple must open the work phone of the accused San Bernardino shooter, and Apple refused. And the FBI hired somebody, we think an Israeli firm, paid them over $1 million to hack that phone, and there was nothing in it. It was I was going to say trumped up, but that's a loaded phrase now. It was a concocted crisis that the FBI created there. So there is this history of tension, and the tech companies, as I said, are working hard to correct day one vulnerabilities that they were not aware of, but the CIA was. And, of course, Bill Binney has told us for years that the NSA loves the relatively low levels of Internet security managed by just about every player in the United States because it allows them to break in without too much trouble or leaving too many footprints. And the footprints here that I'm referring to are often IP addresses, Internet protocol addresses. Everybody's got one, and when we communicate by email, when we browse the Internet, cookies collect our IP addresses so they can welcome us back when we visit that website the next time. Well, there is discussion about whether the hacking tools that were revealed by WikiLeaks yesterday include software to false flag hacking operations. Now, on one side, we have the information about this group at the CIA called Umbrage, U-M-B-R-G-R-A-G-E. WikiLeaks said, Umbrage is stealing the techniques of other nation-state hackers to trick forensic investigators into falsely attributing CIA attacks to other people. And to put it simply, if you're, not a tech geek and this stuff, causes your eyes to glaze over, essentially, anybody can disguise their IP address. Anybody can pretend that they're in Russia or Nigeria or South Africa or Japan with certain devices that generate a phony IP address. And I've explained before that I have a little gizmo, a piece of software, that enables me to use the same IP address every time. I use that to link up for audio connections with radio stations and other outlets. So I'm well aware of this. Now, The Intercept covered this in some detail, and the quote here from the article, The Intercept wasn't able to find documents within the WikiLeaks cache that talk about tricking forensic investigators into attributing attacks to Russia. Instead, they discuss do's and don'ts of tradecraft such as encrypting strings and configuration data in malware to prevent someone from reverse engineering the code or removing file timestamps to prevent investigators from making correlations between compilation times and the working hours of hackers, say, in the U.S. time zones or elsewhere. So it's still an open question, but I'm pretty comfortable with the assumption that our CIA and other intelligence operations do have the capability of disguising their IP addresses and creating false attribution to others. What we don't know is exactly where they have been used. Analytical piece at The Guardian today regarding the inconsistency, the contradiction between the claims from Trump in his tweets that Obama had him wiretapped and the crafted denials that were issued by former Director of National Intelligence and proven perjurer Jimmy Clapper on the TV talk shows on Sunday. So Clapper's assertions, which were that there was no evidence of collusion that he had seen when he left office on the 20th of January between Russians and the Trump campaign. There was communication, we're told, but not collusion. And Clapper also denied that Obama ordered wiretaps of Trump or the Trump campaign. Now, in that denial, there is wiggle room. Because, as I have speculated, when the NSA, for example, taps phones in other countries, they don't need a warrant from the FISA court. They don't need probable cause. Well, the complication that arises is if they're tapping the phone of a Russian ambassador or a Russian intelligence officer and an American is on the other end of that line, well, the rule is that they're supposed to stop listening. Oh, sure. Sure they do. They put in earplugs and just say, no, I can't hear this. There's an American on the line. And also, as I have speculated, and this has been confirmed as a reasonable speculation by Russell Tice, the NSA whistleblower, that they could have swapped the information with the counterparts in England, in Canada, in Australia, and New Zealand. We are the fifth of the so-called Five Eyes English-speaking countries, and there is close collaboration among the intelligence operations of those five nations. Speaking of Russ Tice, I did get him on the phone the other day, and he has been listening to my podcast, he said, on a regular basis. He agrees with my skepticism about the claims that Russia delivered the DNC hacked and the John Podesta leaks to WikiLeaks. He also has great skepticism about what is going on and the way it appears that the deep state and Democratic operatives are trying to constrain Donald Trump in any effort to repair relations with Russia. And Russ Tice has family issues. He was on his way to a dying loved one, and he also has pneumonia. So he has agreed to talk with me when things in his personal life settle down, and I look forward to bringing you that conversation. Every day I pause for a second to thank the people who support my work at the Peter B. Collins Podcast with your subscriptions. Let's name names, shall we? Mark Brodsky, Billy Cook, Kathleen Lusher just renewed her annual subscription. Thank you, Kathleen. And Jeffrey Stewart. These are all regular subscribers to this podcast, and they help pay the freight, the phone bills, the technical bills. I've got some noise on a phone line right now, and it's going to cost money to get that fixed. And you may have figured out that your humble host does not make a living hosting this podcast. So someday I might get there with your help. So come on over to peterbcollins.com, click on the menu button, pull it down, click on Become a Subscriber. It takes you to the sign-up page, and in just minutes, you can get your own subscription going. And hey, if you're allergic to PayPal, no problem. You can mail a check or cash, money order, anything but pennies. The mailing address is on the sign-up page at peterbcollins.com. Now, we know that Trump has made this bromance with Putin a central part of his foreign policy, And he is now responding to what could be efforts to, as I said, constrain him in changing the chemistry with Russia. And we now have a pretty strong statement coming from the deputy or the vice chairman of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Paul Selva. And he has accused Russia of deploying the SSC-8 cruise missile, and that it violates sections of the 1987 Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty. Now, this issue has been raised before, but the Trump administration has been silent. And now it appears that this is an authorized confrontation with Russia over a possible violation of the treaty. Now, this is compounded by the fact that in that phone call with Putin after the inauguration, Trump put the phone down for a second and said, "Hey, am I opposed to this other treaty, the New START agreement?" And they told him, "Yes, you are." So he told Putin that, it's a bad deal for the United States. Well, this could be a test, because if Trump believes that he can pick and choose which agreements he has to honor, then Putin may say, well, Donald, I play that game too. I don't know that for a fact, but I see it as a possibility. Now to the effort to deny millions of Americans health care in the so-called repeal and replacement of Obamacare. Headline on the editorial of the San Francisco Chronicle today properly referred to it as repeal and displace. And the firestorm in Washington is coming from many angles. The Republican leaders who have secretly crafted this bill, they are trying to ram it through on a breathtakingly fast track. Now they were being told that the House may vote on it as early as next week. But they're not going to allow the traditional committee hearings. We're told that at some point before the vote, the CBO scoring about what it's going to cost and how many people will be denied coverage under these so-called reforms. We're told there will be CBO scoring before the vote, but it hasn't happened yet. So, as I've mentioned, there is a group of really hardline ideologues, Rand Paul, Mike Lee, and Ted Cruz. And they are three senators who say that this is Obamacare light and they can't support it. But there are also moderates who feel they might lose their jobs if they support this drastic cutback in health care for American citizens. So this is going to be a fascinating struggle. It all involves Republicans. The Democrats hopefully will remain united and vote against the repeal and the substitution. But how many Republicans will defect? And there are some, you can't call them moderates. There are no moderate Republicans, but there are some who are less conservative who feel the heat from the town hall meetings that they've been conducting, and they feel that their asses might be kicked out of Washington if they just allow this steamroller to run its course. So that part, I think, is going to be very interesting, the politics of it. We also have to look at various constituencies. The American Medical Association has formally come out in opposition. The largest coalition of hospitals in the country is against this bill. And these are not constituencies that the Republicans tend to care a lot about. They are pandering to the Chamber of Commerce and Americans for Tax Reform because of the spending cuts and the really ugly tax breaks that are given to, for example, CEOs of health insurance companies in this bill. So it's interesting to see how many groups are against it, how many people have stood up at town hall meetings and in other fora to say, this is antithetical to my interests. And yet the Republicans are really determined to deliver, and they're going to deliver a real stinker here. It remains to be seen what price they will pay for this nightmare that they have brought us. Hawaii has beaten the state of Washington, the first to court to challenge the revised royal decree on travel, Muslim bans, the immigration issues that Trump released on Monday. So Hawaii has filed suit. Attorney General Doug Chin is challenging the new version of the law, saying that, just like White House advisors have said, this is really the same as the previous iteration. It's just better written and got lawyered up. So it's going to be a fascinating sequence of events here to note that the directives will be challenged in court, and Hawaii is a feeder to the Ninth Circuit, the appeals court here in San Francisco, that upheld the courageous ruling by the judge from Washington State that put the January 27th Trump decree on hold back then. The new executive order, when I read it the other day, had a curious addition. It was an order to study the issue of honor killings that occur in this country. And it instructs the Department of Homeland Security to track and publicize information about gender-based violence against women committed by foreign nationals. Now, as you may know, honor killings occur in certain cultures where women who have sex with a man they're not married to or are perceived as violating cultural norms, in terms of the behavior of women, their families have the right to kill them because they have dishonored the family. And the use of this, the interjection of this into this executive order that is supposed to be about protecting us from dangerous people who would come into this country, the inclusion of the honor killing clause there is seen as a coded effort to get the support of people who hate Muslims. Because ignorant people, the kind who shoot Sikhs because they think they're Muslims, or that guy in Kansas who shot people from the nation of India because he thought they were Iranians. That kind of ignorance is something that Trump can count on among the majority of his followers. And so this dog whistle, this coded reference to honor killings, it's not an accident. No, it's not. And speaking of immigration, I mentioned earlier that there is a local protest here in San Francisco at the home of Peter Thiel. He is the Silicon Valley billionaire who made money on PayPal and I guess on maybe on eBay. And he also is the founder and chairman of Palantir Technologies. And they are providing software that's being used, we think, to round up non-citizens under Trump's draconian new policies. And the protest is going to be at the mansion in San Francisco's Presidio Heights area, 2920 Broadway, this Saturday afternoon between 3 and 6 p.m. Show up if you'd like to express yourself. Here's an indication of the true intent of Trump's plan for a border wall along the Mexican border and his hysterical, fear-mongering over immigration. And in order to fund the border wall, we no longer talk about Mexico paying for it, the Trump administration wants to make massive cuts to the Coast Guard. Now, the Coast Guard does a lot of work protecting our borders from real threats of drug runners and other cartels. And as a sailor, I have a strong affinity for the Coast Guard. And while a cut to build this way over budget Coast Guard cutter, I can live with that. But the idea that you're going to shift money from the people who actually protect our maritime borders and our territorial waters, we're going to cut them so that we can build this wall that will not decrease illegal immigration. It's not going to stop the people who overstay their visas who came in from Europe or Asia. And it shows the real racist intent of the immigration policies. It's all about fear of Latin Americans, starting with Mexicans. And we heard Trump blurt that out on the day he announced his run for president. Now, they're also planning to cut the Transportation Security Agency, those fine folks who fondle you at the airport. And some of that I'm not really opposed to. But again, it sends the signal that they're willing to relax enforcement at sea and at airports while they ratchet it up along the southern border. That's a clear message. The wrecking crew is getting staffed up over there at the Environmental Protection Agency, where Scott Pruitt got installed last week. He's the former Oklahoma Attorney General who filed 14 lawsuits against the EPA. And he's hired a bunch of people who used to work for James Inhofe, the words fail me when you talk about Inhofe. He's just an idiot. And he's been a senator from Oklahoma for a while now. He's in his 80s. And it looks like everybody who's worked as chief of staff for him over the years is being hired by Scott Pruitt at the EPA. And here's a doozy for you. David Kreutzer, a senior research fellow in energy economics and climate change at the Heritage Foundation, is in line to become the top deputy to Scott Pruitt. And he has publicly praised the benefits of increasing carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. That's the kind of people we need there to dismantle the EPA. The budget is proposed to be cut by $2 billion, and they're trying to cut the staff by about 20%. And this would make it even more difficult and time-consuming to dismantle some of the regulations that are favorite targets of the Republicans, because they imagine they can just, shred them or take a Sharpie and run a line through them, and they'll all just go away. But it doesn't really work that way. The latest legal skirmish over the Dakota Access Pipeline is a loss for the Standing Rock Sioux. A federal judge declined yesterday to stop construction of the final section of the Dakota Access Pipeline, and it may be hooked up and ready to pump that devastatingly dangerous high-sulfur crude tar sands type oil as early as next week. That's pretty surprising. Carol Rosenberg is a great reporter at the Miami Herald and has done a lot of coverage of Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. And she reports that a military judge ruled yesterday that defense attorneys can call former CIA officials and the two psychologists who earned $80 million devising the torture programs for the CIA. The one-page ruling by Air Force Colonel Vance Spath says that they will be asked to testify in the case of Abd al-Rahim al-Nashiri, who is accused of being the plotter behind the bombing of the USS Cole back in 1999. And the issue is in part related to the destruction of torture videotapes ordered by Jose Rodriguez, a top CIA official. He's one of the people being forced to testify here, along with former General Counsel John Rizzo and James Mitchell and Bruce Jessen, the psychologists I referred to. And the destruction of those videotapes means that we'll have to rely on the testimony of these individuals about the torture tactics that were used on these people. Reportedly, Nashiri was force-fed liquid food rectally after he went on a hunger strike. He was kenneled like a dog in a cage, hung nude by his arms to the point where a medical officer worried that they would be dislocated. Maybe we will get some on-the-record testimony if that trial ever gets underway. I got a cryptic note from Sabrina D'Souza. She's the former American CIA agent who was trapped in Portugal, faced an extradition order to Italy over the agency's botched kidnapping in 2004 of an Egyptian cleric on the streets of Milan, Italy. And she did win a partial pardon from the Italian president, and we got the idea that she might be able to serve part of her sentence in Italy under house arrest. And I've been trading emails with Sabrina trying to line up an interview. And this morning she emailed, "Can't do interviews for a while. Am swamped with having to deal with legal stuff. Will be back in the U.S. soon." Now that's a surprise. So when she's back, she says, we'll chat, and I will bring you that interview at that time. A report released yesterday shows an increase in the number of people who were wrongfully convicted and then found innocent of those crimes. More than 2,000 exonerations now over the last 30 years. And the National Registry of Exonerations released information showing that black defendants account for 40% of those convicted of a crime, but 50% of those wrongfully convicted. Whites accounted for 36% of wrongfully convicted murder defendants. Only about 15% of all murders committed by black people involve white victims, yet 31% of blacks eventually cleared of murder convictions were initially convicted of killing white people. Yes, racism is alive and well in the United States. There were 166 exonerations last year, which is a new record. The Marines are recoiling from the latest military sex scandal. Turns out there was a website and a Facebook group of active duty and veteran Marines, and they shared thousands of naked and private photos of Marine Corps women. And they also allowed raunchy comments to be posted on the site, and they referred to these women as sluts just because they had nude photos of them. And this just shows that the old boys atmosphere in the military is unrepentant and uncontrolled, unrestrained. And it points out the battle between Senator Kirsten Gillibrand of New York, who has demanded the rewrite of the laws so that the chain of command is not where disciplinary actions and investigations take place, but an outside prosecutor would be brought in. And her major opponent on that effort is a Democratic senator from Missouri, Claire McCaskill, who has really sold out to the military on this one. And finally, I want to congratulate Eric Garcetti, who won re-election in Los Angeles in a landslide yesterday. But more than that, I want to thank L.A. voters who, with a two-thirds majority, voted to tax themselves for the next 10 years in an effort to raise $3.5 billion to fund homeless services and affordable housing. This is one of the great scourges of modern America. We ignore the homeless people who populate our streets and neighborhoods, and we blame them for their condition and take righteous indignation as we ignore them or say that they ought to go somewhere else. And I'm glad Los Angeles is accepting responsibility for its homeless issues, and I hope this pans out. Thanks for joining me for my News and Comment podcast. It's free, and it's available every day on YouTube. I remain Peter B. Collins.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails.